Hello and welcome to our weekly share on the Parsha with a commentary of the Alshich. This week's share is Parshas Netzavim. It is a very short Parsha. It's very brief, and of course, it's the Parsha which is on the cusp of Rosh Hashanah, of the Yom Hadin. It's interesting also the slichos that they say in the morning, just before the one before Rosh Hashanah, again, very brief. It seems to be sort of it's drama. There is tremendous drama and designed drama to get the psychological impact, like all dramatists do, from the audience. In this case, the audience is the Jewish people, and of course, the show is the judgment of the Jewish people and the individual Jews, which is, of course, the Yom Hadin, which is, of course, Rosh Hashanah. Uh, so there is a very real moment here, a very personal moment, and indeed the theme of the parsha seems to be, to my mind anyway, extremely personal. This year in particular, perhaps the idea of a Yom Hadin and the Jewish people being judged is more pertinent and more almost ominous than many years before. And because whenever we use these words, ominous and thinking of the Yom Hadin as being a scary time, and I'm sure I've told you before about the lady in Manchester who once told me that when it comes to this time of the year, she just wants to stay in bed, hide underneath the covers, and not come out until it's all over. Because it does seem a very, very scary time. But as I've said in sharing over the years, that's totally wrong. The big theme is of our prayers during this time of the year is Avinu Malkeinu. We call Hashem Avinu Malkeinu, our Father and our King. Kings are scary, but Avinu, Father, not so much. A father always wants his children back. And the name that Hashem wants us to call him at this time, Avinu. Another encouraging thought is that when you look at the words of a brocha, or maybe the first bracha of the Shemona Esra, when you're standing in front of Hashem 3 times a day praying to him, we say, Baruch, blessed are you, and then the next word, Ato. Well, I already gave it away, sorry, I made a mess of that. Baruch, blessed, Ato, are you. And the interesting thing is, Ato, you. Now you're talking, and of course it's very appropriate to this year, and to this week rather, when the Queen was finally late, the Queen of England was finally late to rest. Her son fully took over the role. He's not gone through his coronation yet, but fully took over the role of the King of England, Scotland, and all the rest of the countries. It's interesting, the idea of a king. When you speak to a king, you don't say, "How are you doing?" It's in the third person. Does His Majesty want? But when it comes to us speaking to Hashem, it's in the first person. Blessed are you, because of course, even if somebody very prestigious, somebody you're halachically obliged to give honor to, that obligation is still present when it comes to a child and his father. Of course, keep it of aim, honoring your mother and the father. You've got to honor them, but you don't speak to them in the third person, which you would to a real king. You don't say, Father, could Father consider lending his son the car this afternoon? It's, Dad, can I have the car? Because again, there's a hint. The relationship between us is a father and a son. So sometimes a father or a mother shouts very, very loudly at the child, and it seems to the child as though the father really is very angry with them. But very often it's a device in order to get the reaction from the child that's necessary. And I think that's very much applicable to Rosh Hashanah as well. This small parsha is, as I say, very pertinent. Let me tell you a story from, I think it goes back 15 years. There is a fellow who I knew and know who is extraordinarily, well, not so much now, but 15 years ago, he was extraordinarily wealthy. We're talking billionaire. He owned businesses, business apartments in Hong Kong, which I believe is the most expensive real estate in the world. And he was invited to a meeting with Israeli generals at the headquarters of the Israeli army, which is in Tel Aviv. And they had, no, he would not tell me, and he could not tell me exactly what the subject was. I wonder if they maybe wanted him to donate a couple of F-18 fighters from his small bank balance. But anyway, at the end of the discussion, 2 of the generals were having a coffee and talking to him and having a discussion. and a third general came along. Now, it's certainly 15 years ago. The last redoubt, the last uh, uh, area in Israeli society, which is the purview and the bailiwick of the secular world, is the Israeli army. Recently, since that time, I believe now the head of the Israeli army is in fact a religiously observant Jew. But in those days, 15 years ago, and certainly traditionally, the army was secular, right? Anyway, the two generals are talking to this fellow, a third joins the conversation and said the following thing: you have to believe in Hashem. You have to believe in Hashem. Israeli generals, this is astonishing stuff. We know precisely what Iran is planning to do. If you don't believe in Hashem, we're finished. Very, very interesting. Now I'm making this recording on Thursday, and yesterday, when President Putin of Russia mobilized 330,000 or so additional troops for Ukraine, he also made it quite clear that he's willing to nuke the West, not Ukraine. He's willing to use nuclear weapons against the West for arming Ukraine. It's a very interesting state of affairs going into a Rosh Hashanah, where all the things that could happen to us individually, as families, as communities, and of course the entirety of the Jewish people is hanging in the balance, and the scales is being assessed for the year to come to nuclear threats and many other threats facing us religiously. The attack on the Jewish community here in New York from the appalling New York Times, a paper which actually styles itself the largest Jewish newspaper in the world. Well, it depends how you define Jewish and what the adjective really means. Anyway, so let's jump in, and it'll be a short share tonight, I think. I will try. Because at the beginning of the Parsha, it addresses the Jewish people, and then talks about what happens after all the terrible things that have happened to the Jewish people have happened to the Jewish people. And then there's a respite. When Hashem says that, and after all the suffering you've gone through, seems to be at the end of the Jewish story, then I will turn all of the events that happened to you round, and the people who persecuted you, they will be and are persecuting you. They will be the ones to suffer. So this, if you've got a Chumash there, it's in Devarim, it's chapter 11. Sorry, Lamed. Why Lamed jumped into my mind as 11? I don't know. Devarim Lamed Netzavim. And if you look at Pasuk Zayin, it says, Hashem is going to put excuse me, all these curses, all the things that happened to you, on your enemies. But the expression here is really interesting. On people that, I suppose, your enemies, and the Sanecha, people that hate you, now, the Ramban was a famous incident in the life of the Ramban when King James I of Aragon, remember, Spain only became a united kingdom in 1492 with the marriages of King Ferdinand and Isabella, which united the major houses and therefore the major territories of Spain into one polity, into one nation. I come from the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and this was the United Kingdom of Spain, or the uniting of the Kingdom of Spain. And at that point, or before then, Spain was different countries. King James I of Aragon, the area of Barcelona today, an independent nation. And at that point, in the history of King James I of Aragon, he summoned the Ramban, Nachmanides, and demanded that he conduct or participate in a vikuach, in a disputation with the church. The church loved this during the medieval period, the early medieval period, and on, when they would ask or invite a rabbi to come and debate which religion was right, theirs or ours. The church made it quite clear that if the rabbi had the impertinence to win the debate, they would lay on a pogrom. And so the Ramban demurred and didn't answer the king's call. The king summoned him to explain himself, and he explained just as I said, Your Majesty, if I win, they will simply kill my congregation. King James gave the famous guarantee that the Ramban could speak with total liberty and freedom, and he would guarantee the safety of the Jewish community. He did that. He was not able to guarantee the security of the Ramban, who fled, and that's how he ended up in Israel. However, the important thing is that having won the debate, and that was seen as a victory by the fact that the gold prize that was offered to the winner of the debate, the Ramban officially was debating against something called Pablo Cristiani. Pablo Cristiani, of course, with a name like Paul Christian, you can probably guess was a Jew who had converted to Christianity. But he wasn't just debating against him, he was debating against the palace and the bishops and the cardinals. And not only did he defeat them in the 4-day debate, but he defeated them soundly and with good old-fashioned Yiddish chutzpah. It's actually quite funny. When he did so, the king gave him this prize, but the church said no, they won the debate. And realizing that they were now using this for propaganda and simply lying, he wrote an account of the debate. And it's very, very interesting because he quotes the Ramban there, not in his commentary on the Chumash, which I have in front of me, but there in his recollection or his record of the debate. It points to this pasuk, and he said to the church that this pasuk refers to who are your enemies and the people that hate you. This is the Muslim world, and this is the Christian world. And these persecutors of the Jews, these are the ones that Hashem is saying, for these hundreds of years of persecution that you've imposed on us, of course, culminating in the Holocaust and an Islamic threat from the Islamic Republic of Iran to drop nuclear bombs in Israel or fire nuclear missiles at Israel, that's going to be turned on you, said the Ramban to them. Well, he didn't say the nuclear thing, but you get the idea. The double expression, the people who hate you and the people who are your enemies, that's the Christian world and the Muslim world. In other words, it seems to be really very contemporary, very about what's going on now. Now, if we read on, in fact, that's just at the beginning of Pasuk Zayin, but if I jump down to the next, to Yud Aleph, so if I go from 7 to 11, then we find that just 4 psukim later, actually, you know what? I'm going to read to you a little bit in between. So Hashem is going to put all these curses happen to you on your enemies. And you will do at that stage in history, whenever that's going to be, you will do all the mitzvahs which I command you. It's not saying I'm commanding you to do it, it's saying, but it will now then be that you will do them. And it will be that Hashem will reward you for the fact that you keep the mitzvahs, and all of your animals, your crops, etc., they will all prosper enormously. Hashem is going to rejoice with you as he did with your forefathers before. Why? Because you listen to the voice of Hashem. The Shmor mitzvah to keep his mitzvahs, kachosov, his statutes, of Ksud, the B'tar, Sefer Torah, which is written in Sefer Torah Azeh, which is written in the Sefer Torah, Ki Toshav al Hashem, Elokecha, B'kol V'ov, B'kol Nashon, because you've returned. Because you returned. At this, whatever this period in time of history is, you will have returned to Hashem. And then it says, Ki mitzvah zayis, Asher Nakim Mitzvah Chayigan. Because this mitzvah which I'm commanding you today, Lo Niflas Hi Mimcha. It's not impossible for you, or very far from you. It's not in heaven. Who's going to get it for us so that we can do it? It's not up there in the heavens. It's not overseas. Who's going to cross over the seas to get it for us? So that we can hear where it is and we will do it. This mitzvah is very near to you and very easy. Bepicha in your lips, b'locha in your heart to do. What is the mitzvah? What is this mitzvah that the pasuk is talking about? The Gemara, when the Gemara talks about this, Gemara in Eruvin, says it's talking about the keeping of them is the Torah itself. The Torah itself, the Jewish people and their connection to the Torah. But the Alshich says, well, that's extremely difficult because it says ki ha-mitzvah zois. It seems to be talking a specific mitzvah. Why would this specific mitzvah, however, be one which would generate all this reward? Why is this specific mitzvah any greater than any other mitzvah? So the Alshich says, as we've just been talking in the pasuk before, that this mitzvah, the mitzvah we're talking about is kikora belecha. Sorry, if I go back to where he talked about that. Yeah, when it says ki tishma b'kol Hashem elokach, you will listen to. This is verse 10. You will listen to the voice of Hashem, your God. Lishmor mitzvahs, keep his mitzvahs, and his statutes, which are written in the Sefer Torah. So the Alshich says the reason why the rabbis in the Gemara in Eruvin cite that particular identity for this mysterious mitzvah, which you're supposed to get all the reward from, is because that's the context of the psukim that just came before. But he struggles with the fact because it says ha-mitzvah, that's not really the Torah, it's a different thing. So the Ramban, if we can stick with the Ramban, says the mitzvah we're talking about is the mitzvah of teshuvah. So which one really is it? And the answer is it's really both. The Alshich says the guarantee that Hashem promises that there will come a time when the Jewish people will return, the mitzvah of teshuvah, it's not far from you. That mitzvah of doing teshuvah, which the Gemara says is Torah, they're the same thing. Because the Gemara famously says, if you find yourself struggling as a Jew, go to the Beis HaMedrash, go to the yeshiva, and sit down in a shiur or sit down in a chavrusa and learn Torah. It could equally apply to women. And learn Torah. And that will guarantee that you do teshuvah. This is a very strange phenomenon, that apparently the mitzvah is indeed, as the Ramban says the Alshich, the mitzvah of teshuvah. But how do you get to do that mitzvah? It said before, when it says in Pasuk Yud, ki tishma b'kol Hashem elokach, because you're listening to the voice of God in his Torah. If you're struggling as a Jew, go and learn Torah, and that will guarantee that you will do teshuvah. In other words, learning the Torah becomes the vehicle for the person to change. Teshuvah means to return to a state of connection with God from having been in a state of disconnection from God. Last week's Parsha and all the curses that come when the Jewish people have abandoned Torah. No, there's going to be a time when it's guaranteed we will return, and all the nasty things that happen to us will happen to our enemies who are plotting today to destroy us. Don't worry. But why? Because you've done teshuvah. And how will you do teshuvah? You'll do teshuvah by learning Torah. To bring this to life, because it sounds a little bit abstract and a little bit mystical, when I was the campus rabbi for 23 years for the 14 universities of Manchester, Liverpool, and all the rest, the universities in the northwest of England, I used to do a thing called cheer and beer. There might be people even watching this who used to come along for a very short shiur, which I would give, and I would buy all the students a drink in the bar. In the student bar, we would take over a whole section of the bar, sitting there, a whole bunch of Jews learning Torah in a pub, as they call it in the UK. And this was actually a very successful model. In those days, just before I left, incidentally, they banned smoking in pubs, which I so appreciate. I hate cigarette smoke. And I hated, obviously, in a bar, in a pub, it's not exactly the most religiously sensitive environment to be in. But the shiur was successful. But sometimes there's a school called Jewish Day School, now called Yesodi HaTorah. The principal at the time was a friend of mine. And sometimes if he was missing a teacher, he'd ask me to come and teach in an elementary school, teach the little boys Mishnayos. And I used to go from the bar, the pub at the university, say goodbye to my students there, and walk into this class of little 9-year-old or 10-year-old boys, who, of course, all stand up. And there, it was just a totally different experience. We would open the Mishnah together, and we would start to learn the Mishnah together, which you do in a sort of chant with this little particular nigan, a little tune, which the words are learned to. And I would say it, and the boys would say it, and then I would teach them what the Mishnah was. And I felt I felt as though it was almost like when you feel really sweaty or dirty and you go into a shower and you do feel the water washing and the nice soapy water washing all the schmutz from you. And this was like a spiritual experience. That the learning of that Mishnayos did that for me. I felt as though I was washing away all that horrible cigarette smoke and all the images that I might have accidentally seen being naturally in a pub. That's what I was talking about here. The process of learning Torah is a process which can transform and change you, but there is obviously a condition or two, and that is it has to be, as the Pasuk said, back to Pasuk Yud, Ki tishma b'kol Hashem elokechem. It's got to be learning Torah in order to listen to what it says, and as we said in last week's Seder, to put it into effect. There are plenty of people who learned Torah and had no intention of putting it into effect. In fact, when the Soviet Union was created, it was the Yevsektia, the Jewish section of the Communist Party, who gathered up the rabbis, rounded up the rabbis, would be the correct phrase, shot them sometimes, certainly sent them to Siberia. But there's many cases I heard reported from people from that time who said that the Jews taking them with their machine guns to put them into the cattle trucks to send them to Siberia would often discuss Gemaras with them. There's a people who learned Gemara happily and probably very competently, more competently than I probably could. But it hadn't gone and become part of them. For that, I want to quote the wonderful Simcha Zissel, the Alta, the founder of the Yeshiva of Kelm, and he points to this phenomenon because the Gemara says in Kedushin and Daf Lamed on the base famously, "Borasi Yetzara." Those who are familiar with this Gemara will probably finish that in their head. "Borasi Yetzara." I created the Yetzara, and you probably say, "Borasa Torah Tavlin," because most people say that, but that's actually incorrect. It says "Borasi Yetzara." Oh, sorry, I've got to use my fingers. It says "Borasi Yetzer Hara." It should say symmetrically, Barossi Torah Tavlin. The Torah is the antidote. I created the Yetzer Hara. The Torah is it, but it doesn't say that. It says Barossi Yetzer Hara, Barossi Loi Torah Tavlin. It says the four fingers. Barossi Yetzer Hara, Barossi Loi Torah Tavlin. It's that finger, the Loi. What's the Loi? And Rav Simcha Zissel says, because you can find somebody who is always complaining about him having insufficient funds. He's poor. You walk in to see this fellow, and he's sitting at a table with stacked high with $100 bills. And this fellow is always complaining. He's surrounded by, it must be $1 billion. He's still looking miserable. Why on earth would he be miserable? The answer is because it's not his money. When is it that the Torah will have this effect on you, this transformatory effect on you, of changing you into a different person? When will it wash away the Yetzer Hara? Well, the answer is if you make it yours, if you take it and it becomes part of you. Now, obviously, there's a very, very important points going on here. There is a concept of transformation which is fundamental to Judaism. We can get it wrong and we can come back and get it right. We are expected to make mistakes. Rabbi Yosef Yossel Horowitz, the founder of the Novardika yeshivas, points out that Hashem Yisbarach created this world and stated in the Torah that it was Tov Ma'od, it was very good. The implication of the words Tov Ma'od, something is very good, is something isn't very good. Something else isn't very good. When Hashem created this world and states that it's very good, does that imply that he created worlds that weren't very good? Yes. How many? How many failed worlds? 974, says Kabbalistic tradition. 974 failed worlds? Hashem can't make mistakes. He doesn't make a failed world. So it doesn't mean 974 failures. And anyway, why tell us about it? Why tell Moshe Rabbeinu and Mount Sinai to make it part of our tradition? And the answer is, Hashem created 974 intentional failures and told us about it, so that we should know that the basis of this world is getting it wrong before you get it right. You're expected to make mistakes. We all make mistakes. And to know that there is a process, a shower that can wipe away or wash away those mistakes is an encouragement. That is called Rosh Hashanah, 10 days, and then Yom Kippur. That period is the big shower awaiting the Jewish people to step into to wash this process, all this stuff away. But you've got to actively be involved in this process. There are many ways a person can change and come back, but there are ways to change and come back. If you study Torah and if you've learned in yeshiva, or you learned in seminary, if you, as it were, go back to your roots, recapture that, contact your old rabbis, and very often we find in yeshivas people go back to yeshiva sometime during the year, maybe for a few days, just to recapture who they were. That can do it for you. Sit down with a new rabbi and get new insights into Torah. That can do it for you. But all these vehicles, techniques are predicated on one thing. And it says it in Pasuk Yud, Kisishma b'kol Hashem Elokecha. You're willing to take take yourself in your hand. As it says in Pirkei Avos, says Elul, if I'm not for myself, who's going to be for me? Ultimately, it's going to be you. I want to change. I'm glad that Hashem accepts that I've slipped up, I've messed up. I'm glad that He offers me the opportunity to come back. Now I'm going to take it. Oh, but I've made mistakes. Of course you made mistakes. There's not one Rosh Hashanah, there's not one Yom Kippur in your life. It's an annual event. You expect to make mistakes. If I was teaching, as I was about 6 months ago, a couple of little kids who got hold of guitars, and I played very badly the guitar, but at least I was teaching. It was an introductory thing. So I'm teaching them what to do. Of course they're going to make a mess of it. Of course they're going to make mistakes. They come back next week, and I've corrected a little bit, and they've practiced. So it's a little bit less bad. And they come back next week, and it's a little bit less bad. And as a teacher, I'm very happy. They're doing their job. Did I, in 3, 4, or 5 lessons, turn them into a classical guitarist, a violinist, a pianist? No, of course not. That takes a long time. You're here. You're meant to be here for a long time, classically 120 years. And as long as you're going in that direction, going up, then that's fine. That's all that's really expected of you. It's a thought that Representative Zessel's great Talmud, Rabbi Yerucham, talks about in chapter Mem Daled of Das Chochmah Moshe. You're only expected to do the best you possibly can. You're only expected to be the best that you can. That's all. If you're doing that, you don't have to go for perfection. You just have to be the best you that you can be. That's all Hashem wants from you. And He wants to encourage you by giving you a day. In fact, not just one day, but a whole process of days. A Rosh Hashanah, lead up to Rosh Hashanah, the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, in order for you to get yourself right and to realize you can come back again. This stuff is not in heaven. It's in the base of Medrash, or maybe in your synagogue, right in your doorstep. You can put in your mouth and into your heart. Start learning it in order to go into your heart. And it will. If you want it, you can have it. It's in your hands. I would like to wish you all, first of all, thank you very much for joining in my share every week. I should thank you. I wish you all a kasima taiva. It should be written down and it should be sealed for you and for us, for the whole of the Jewish people, for a wonderful year full of health, full of wealth, full of success, of pride in our children's achievements, peace, and eventually be as a Mashiach. I wish you all a great year.